Welcome everyone to the Omaha High School Sports Playoff Preview and Predictions. I'm your host Dannymadeit with my co-hosts Luke and Ryan. And this show is brought to you by Rocket Roofing General Contractors, Medis, TTs, Training and Performance. We're just gonna get in right to our reactions and thoughts from last week. Any surprises, any crazy things from last week for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, most of the games kind of went the way that we saw them going. Gothenburg did top four Calhoun, which we all well, Ryan picked for Calhoun, but Danny and I both picked Gothenburg in that one, and then O'Neill and Mount Michael, another one that we incorrectly picked. I had O'Neill in that one, and then we can get into that Central City Aurora game also. But yeah,
For me, I think, yeah, like you said, it was pretty chalk for the most part. Nothing too crazy that we didn't expect. But I will say the performer of the week, Kip Brigham and Wahoo, Kip Brigham had 7 touchdowns in that game. That was the quietest 7 touchdowns I've ever seen, probably. I'm not quite sure how. I haven't heard about that one through the media and stuff, but that's what caught my eye the most. Wahoo looked great. Um, Mount Michael also making history for them. That was their first playoff win since 19. I don't know, I couldn't tell you the exact one, but that was a historic performance for Mount Michael as well. What about you, Ryan? What did you think of that first round of the playoffs?
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised by many of the outcomes. I'm glad you guys picked Gothenburg first so I could pick that Fort Calhoun win correctly. Otherwise, I would have went that Gothenburg route also. But overall, of course, being a Central City guy, I would have loved to seen the Bison perform a little better, but really everything else was kind of on par of what I was expecting. And some of the games maybe were a little different than I thought they would go, and just the way that they played out. But really overall, it kind of seems like we're getting what we expected to. The second round here.
Yeah, just a quick recap. Ryan actually this week got the best of us through the records. He went 6-2 this week predictions. Luke and I both went 5-3. But that kind of rounds up our round one. It was a good round one of football. A lot of upsets in other classes, but C1, there was a couple, but most part, it's kind of what everyone thought. So we'll head into the Elite Eight, the 4 games. These games, we're gonna get 4 teams moving on to the semifinals after this week. We'll start here with Mount Michael at Wahoo. I'll start here. Mount Michael won 28-14 versus O'Neill, and Wahoo in a dominant game versus Milford 69-14. Throughout these games, I'm kind of just gonna uh, just look at their last games they played, so and what we can take away from them. Let's see what we can take away from Mount Michael's win. Here's my notes. Mount Michael is a relatively average offensive performance. They had 5.3 yards per carry, which is above average, but overall, they had a passing touchdown and only 1 turnover offensively. You won't be able to turn it over against Wahoo, so they'll have to clean that up for sure. Brady Quinlivan was the number 1 guy for Mount Michael. He caught 5 balls, 44 yards, and a score. Mount Michael's defense allowed 20 first downs versus O'Neill. Although O'Neill has an underrated offense, I think that Mount Michael will have to clean that up again as well. Mount Michael played well enough defensively, holding O'Neill to 14 points. And what can we get from Wahoo versus Milford? Wahoo went absolutely wild rushing the ball. And specifically, Kip Brigham had the most quiet 7-yard touchdown game maybe ever. He had 18 carries, 251 yards, 6 touchdowns on the ground, and 1 through the air, which is crazy stuff. 10 different players carried a ball in that game, so you don't see that very much. Stat-wise, there's nothing really more I can tell you that you really don't already know about this Wahoo team. They absolutely punish these inferior teams, and they absolutely never play down to the competition. But they are great on offense and defense. What do you guys have so far versus Mount Michael and Wahoo?
yeah, I think that Mount Michael just really capitalized on opportunities in that game. They scored 28 points, but their offense was relatively pedestrian, as you said. They had a punt return for a touchdown and a pick six that kind of carried them over the hump into that win. But they did a good job defensively of just bending and not breaking. But ultimately, they're going to have to bring a lot more offensively to hang with Wahoo. And in that Wahoo game, the game was actually tied after the first quarter, interestingly enough. But then in the second and third quarters combined, they scored 62 points and really just left no doubt against no Brigham. Big day, 251 yards on the ground, seven total touchdowns to propel my fantasy team into a
Yeah.
nice week. But yeah, so Wahoo definitely performed as we expected, and was a little surprised that Mount Michael was able to bring that win over O'Neill. But that was just one of those matchups that was fun to watch. This kind of in Eastern Nebraska metro area team versus team from a more rural area. There were a few of those matchups that we got to see, and this was one of them. And the Omaire ended up winning.
So
Yeah,
for
and
the
definitely,
you're good. Sorry, my bad.
oh, I was just going to say, kudos to Mount Michael on getting that win over O'Neill. Definitely always great to get a win in the playoffs. Wahoo, though, just Mylanta. They are dominant.
Yeah, for these games, I have enough time now since there's only 4 games. I have enough time to go back and watch a little more film. So through these games, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of insight as to what I see on film. So we'll start off with Mount Michael. Mount Michael, instantly, Brady Quinlivan stands out. He's very fast, and they like to use him in as many ways as they can through the air and through the ground. He had most of his success through the air last week, and also Luke mentioned that he returned a punt, and he looked really fast on that punt. So I think that he will need to make a difference on special teams, like he did against O'Neill, to have a shot in this one. I think that that's the biggest thing for them. If they can play well on all 3 phases of the ball, they have a little bit more of a chance. Wahoo runs a very heavy offense, a lot of heavy personnel, like 12 and 13 personnel, and a lot of pin and pulling. Not to mention, they line up before the snap, and then they quickly shift to their spots. It's just tough to deal with defensively, and Mount Michael runs a 3 front, so they will most certainly have to change that up whenever they face Wahoo here. So that's again a disadvantage for them that they have to change their scheme a little bit and stack the box to account for the heavy personnel. Uh, Not really an advantage, like I said. Wahoo is one of those teams that the lines aren't necessarily big, but the team is extremely well coached on both sides of the football, and I think they're rarely ever in the wrong spots, offensively or defensively. Even though Wahoo's stats say they're good against the run, I think that a really real running team could have some success here against Wahoo. I'm not sure if that's Mount Michael, but I think that Wahoo has some potential to be gashed by the run in some form. But overall, I think Wahoo will be able to run the ball just as well as they have been all year, and that should be the difference in this one. So, with that being said, let's move on to the picks. For me, I'm going to go with Wahoo here, but Mount Michael should be absolutely proud of their season they put on. They have made some future, and also I think that they should take this game, take these predictions, take the previews as a chip on their shoulder, and just come in and play well. What do you guys have for this?
Yeah, Wahoo's been dominant all year long, and I think that's going to keep going in this one. As you said, good season for Mount Michael, but they're going through the buzzsaw right now, and that buzzsaw is.
Yeah, and I think, if I was coaching Mount Michael right now, I think the only thing that you can do is continue to do what you do, be you, and hope for some good bounces, some tough breaks for Wahoo and capitalize on those. But, overall, this definitely looks like it's Wahoo's game to win, and I don't see any reason why they don't. So I'm definitely going to pick Wahoo in this one and wish Mount Michael the best.
Absolutely. So now we move on to Syracuse and Ashton Greenwood. The next 3 games for me are a lot more interesting to me than the first one. I think that the next few games can either team can really win. So I think that's really fun to see, and it's going to be a little bit less chalk. Last week, I asked Syracuse to prove themselves and who they are versus a gross Catholic team that has seen teams like Lakeview, Wahoo, and Ashland Green, and they showed up and they showed that they are a legit team, beating Gross 43 to 20. And as expected, Ashland Greenwood had a dominant performance against Shatter and won 47 to 13. What do you guys have for here?
Yeah, I would echo what you said about Syracuse. I thought it was really impressive what they did against Gross Catholic. I kind of had that same thought if this was their prove it game where we weren't sure what Syracuse was like, and they came out against probably the best team they played all year in Gross Catholic and really dominated. They ran for 388 yards in that game, averaged over 8 yards a carry. So you know the strength of the Syracuse football team, it is running the football, and the opposite is true of Ashland Greenwood. They have probably the best passing attack in Class C, and that was extremely evident against Shadron as they were up 47-0 at halftime in that game and really just left no doubt. Derek Tonjes threw for 365 yards on 68.8% passing and 6 touchdowns. Another player that helped out my fantasy team a lot this week with those 6 touchdowns. Logan Fangmeyer was actually his top target in that game. Kissinger has been the guy all year long, but he found Fangmeyer 4 times for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this is a battle of two teams with opposite strengths, with Ashland Greenwood going to throw the ball, Syracuse really going to pound the rock.
Yeah, and I definitely thought that, both of these teams did a great job. There's so much talk around Wahoo being dominant, but really showing that, hey, we can be dominant ourselves, and we're not to be taken lightly here in this portion of the bracket. So, impressive performance, Syracuse, that rushing attack, Jansen and Lentz, is just really, really impressive to see the numbers that they put up. And Ashland, for me, that defense stands out. And I think that's a really interesting, matchup there, looking at the Syracuse rushing attack and that dominant defense that we seen last week.
Absolutely. So here are my film notes. So got the chance to dive into these teams a little more, and for Ashland's offense, it's the film absolutely repeats what it says on the stat line. Ashland's they're as advertised. Derek Tonjes is a great passer that understands the quarterback position, probably the best out of any quarterback left in this. Certainly passing game wise, he's very tall. He has a fantastic three-step drop, and he just lets it rip. So he's able to just get in his drop and punish defenses like almost immediately and throw these like big time throws with the posts and the corners. So they're going to have to take advantage of weaker DBs, and you've seen that all season with Ashton Greenwood. They've taken advantage of the weaker DBs. So Ashton can struggle running the ball, though. They're a far better passing team or a far better blocking unit than they are between the tackles. They do run a lot of outside of the tackle stuff, kind of like some speed option stuff. But Ashton's defense is a three front that is very diverse. I noticed that they change and show different looks pre and post snap. They have different personnel. You see a lot of guys going in and out of the defense on the game, which is not really easy for a team to dissect. So that could be a challenge here for Syracuse. But Ashton Greenwood, actually, I don't know if it will be a challenge, just because we'll talk about a little bit in a few seconds on how Syracuse runs their offense. Uh, but yeah, they're a good defense. They can sometimes get caught in all of this pre and post snap stuff, so they can get out of position pretty easily and get gashed, which brings us to Syracuse and their wing T offense. So I'm personally not a huge fan of the wing T, but these guys run it very well, and they have some players. They also have some package. They're not strictly wing T. They have some packages that they're running 11 personnel, but I don't think that'll play much of a factor versus Ashland. I think they're just going to stay in that wing T because that's what they're best at. Special teams also for Ashland. They got a pick on a fake punt versus Shattering. Although that was not the prettiest play from Shattering that they threw a pick. But yeah, Syracuse on defense plays a 4-2. with a gadget nickel defender that kind of switches between the 4-2. So that could be a little bit of a tricky thing, especially in the quick passing game where he's moving from the nickel to wherever he is, Sam or Will. They struggled versus the run last week. The linebackers were kind of out of place a little bit. They will have a tougher challenge this week with an offense that challenges linebackers more than any offense in C1. They pass and run the speed option well outside the tackle. So that's going to be very, very challenging for them. And they are going to be uh, in a game where they need to use their brain. And it's going to be really tough for them. But with all that being said, that's kind of what I got out of the film. Let's get to the picks. I'll start here. I've got Ashland Greenwood here. I think that it has a potential to be a higher scoring game, but I think Ashland Greenwood is going to provide a team or provide a play style that Syracuse has not remotely seen this year.
I agree with that one. I think it's just so rare in Class C1 to have a team that throws the ball as well as Ashland Greenwood does. And I think Ashland is definitely going to be challenged up front with a level of physicality that they haven't seen since they played Wahoo, and that was very early in the season. So I think that Syracuse might come out and punch them in the mouth at in the start of the game, but I think ultimately Syracuse DBs aren't going to be able to hang with those speedsters over there in Ashland. I think Ashland ends up coming away in the shootout.
I can't disagree with either one of you. I would love to, so we have some disagreement here, but I have Ashland Greenwood in this one also. So much of the same as you guys. I just think it's a little bit of a better matchup for them. So I see them coming out in a close one.
All right, two clean sweeps in a row. That's going to bring us to our second half of the bracket. So we got Fort Calhoun at Sydney. Fort Calhoun coming off a 20-13 win versus Gothenburg, and Sydney coming off a gritty 21-14 versus Pierce. What do you guys kind of dissect on these two teams heading to each other this week? In Sydney, not to each other. They'll be in Sydney this time.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this on the preview last week about Pierce just being better than their record and their seeding showed, and they came out and proved us right in that game. Pierce looked really good out there. They're obviously a lot better than the 14 seed they were, but they gave Sydney a four quarter battle. They Pierce scored in the fourth quarter with 10 minutes left and tied the game up at 14-14. But the Sydney defense held strong as we kind of talked about that Sydney defense just being elite. They're arguably the best in the field. Just a really strong defense led by Keen Kaiser in the middle, the Iowa State commit. Alec Doty kind of struggled in that game passing the football, and that's going to be something he's going to have to figure out as the tournament goes on. He kind of struggled last year as they got into the semifinals, throwing all those picks against Central City. That ultimately was what cost Sydney the game against the Bison. But Reese Dorsey really picked up the slack for him as he ran for 161 yards and two touchdowns, and then also a scoop and score by Kyle Jaggers helped that one out. Fort Calhoun, on the other hand, kind of proved us wrong against Gothenburg. I thought that Gothenburg was going to come out and just kind of be the more physical team and ultimately win the game. But although they scored first, Fort Calhoun ended up scoring 20 points in a row, I believe, to secure a victory in that one. Adam Elifson had a successful day through the air, passing for 207 yards on 75% passing and a touchdown. Eli Tinkham was the leading receiver in that game, 6 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. He was not the leading receiver on the season, but came out and had a really good game. And that's kind of what Fort Calhoun's going to need is just some of those guys to step up from different roles. So I think it's an interesting game because Fort Calhoun is a passing first team. They didn't run the ball well against Fort Calhoun, and that's something that Sydney hasn't really seen, a team that actually throws the ball really well. They haven't seen that all year long. And as their two playoff wins coming into the tournament were against Gothenburg and Shadron, both run first teams, and so is Pierce. So Adam Central, or excuse me, Fort Calhoun is probably going to throw the ball well against Sydney, and that's going to test them for sure. But Fort Calhoun also hasn't seen a team like Sydney, and I think that's going to test.
Yeah, Luke hit it all on the head there. When I looked at Sydney Pierce, we got what we expected in many ways, but the one thing that did catch me a little bit off guard was the Sydney struggles through the air and seeing the rushing game being a bigger factor for them. Fort Calhoun, we talked about last time, going up against such a good Gothenburg defense, and shout out to those offensive linemen for setting things up and setting the tone at the line of scrimmage. And, that's a tough defense to go up against with the Swedes. So, really, Fort Calhoun impressed me a lot to get out of there with a win against a tough defense. Sydney impressed me also getting a win over a tough team. When you look at the two of them, Sydney had the heartbreak last year on their home turf. I think they have a little bit of extra motivation coming into things this year. So, I think we're going to see a big fight out of them. But, for Fort Calhoun to already go up against such a good defense the first week and now looking at a good defense again, you got to think that that sets them up well with a lot of confidence and, potentially do what we've seen out of Central City and get some confidence down the stretch, Central City last year, I should say, and get some confidence as you come down the stretch and make things happen in the playoffs. So, they got to be big believers in themselves right now, which can carry you a long way as well.
Yeah, as Ryan said, Gothenburg, on film, they have one of the best defenses I've watched throughout this class, and it's really underrated how good their defense is. So that I think that's a huge testament to Fort Calhoun that they were able to conquer adversity here in that one. So we'll get to the rest of my film notes. Sydney is a shotgun option team, a lot of pulling from the linemen. So all 22. And 22, Rice Dorsey is a bad linebacker read away from popping a home run every play. So they really need to read their keys every play and make sure that they're in the right spots. Alex Doty can also be a weapon, but Pierce was able to keep him in check last week. He didn't have a crazy rushing game like we've seen him have before, but I think. And he can and will have a bigger game just because they're going to be a little more focused on Dorsey this game because of that big game last week. I think that Alex Doty can have a bigger game here. I think he will. They can pass most of the time, but it's short passes. They kind of just want to get the ball out to Kaiser or Holly in like a quick out or some type of comeback route, just to get the ball out fast and give an opportunity for those guys to make a play. Sydney, defensively, I think they are vulnerable against the pass. We've seen a very similar play between Sydney or Fort Calhoun and Pierce, where they had a guy take advantage of the slot and the safety. They left a little bit of a cushion there, and they took advantage of it and they zipped it in for a touchdown. They kind of had a similar play last week as well. So Fort Calhoun's path to success offensively is to be decisive and fast in the pass game, like they have been this year when they're winning. Uh, Gothenburg has a good defense, like I mentioned before, perhaps better than Sydney. So I think that it could be a pretty big thing for them. The DBs for Gothenburg also played well. Their quarterback was capable of making those tough throws. One of his early throws was a corner out between two defenders, and he hit Connor Hart. That was one of the better throws I've seen all year. Really underrated throw. Sydney has shown weaknesses versus the corner and the post route, so I think that them showing that they can hit those consistently is a good sign for them. They need to hit on those routes frequently to keep them honest, and also open up the run a little bit. They didn't run the ball very well last week. Fort Calhoun's defense, though, is a three front defense that shifts with a lot of overhang presence. Their defensive ends are very tall. If you look at them, they're huge players. Fort Calhoun's defense also reads their keys decently well, but they allow the short yardage runs, long drives. Gothenburg didn't really challenge them with the read options like Sydney will, though. So that's kind of what I have for this game for that. We're going to move to the picks. My pick here, I'm going to go with Fort Calhoun. I think that this should be another really close game. But if Fort Calhoun is able to connect passing, they should win. And they need to not turn over the ball. We've seen Pearson Sydney turn over the ball a few times last week, and I think that Fort Calhoun they should win here. I think.
Yeah, so we see our first upset pick. That's very interesting. A little bit different perspective. as my team played against both of these teams in the playoffs last year. Saw Fort Calhoun in the first round and then Sydney in the semifinals. And I think Fort Calhoun is a really solid football team, and they're going to really challenge Sydney passing the football in a way that they haven't seen with Adam Elofsson, who's a 3 year starter at quarterback, very successful throwing the ball. But the athletes that Sydney has are just a different level. I mean, the guys in the trenches, it's a different team from last year, but different level of play in the trenches as those guys at Sydney are just a lot bigger than Fort Calhoun's are, and their playmakers in the backfield and out at receiver are just a little bit better than Fort Calhoun's. As even a guy like Lance Holly, who's not a big part of that Sydney offense, but he's got legit track speed. He's a sprinter, and I think ultimately that Fort Calhoun is just going to get overwhelmed by the athleticism of Sydney.
Yeah, and I went back and forth on this one more than any other game, I think. I really like what Fort Calhoun has done, and I really think highly of that offense that they have. But I'm going to go with Luke on this one, and I'm picking Sydney. I think that defense just finds a way to get it done in the end, and I think they, like I alluded to earlier, I think they're extra hungry this year after coming so close last year. So I think that is going to give Sydney the edge in this one, and we'll see. Should be a fun game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty close game. And that brings us to the final game. Final game we're going to preview here. This is my personal favorite game of the week. I'm really, really excited to see how this turns out. Lakeview's coming off a 7-point win. Uh, in versus Boys Town, and Aurora is coming off a dominant win, as you guys know, 42-21 versus Central City. I'm gonna let you guys start on this one. What did you see from Aurora, and what is the positives and from Aurora, and also Lakeview? Just because you guys were at the Aurora game, so what can you guys give me for this Aurora game?
I'll let you start on this one, Ryan.
Yeah, so looking at Aurora last week, and 2 weeks in a row, they come out, they beat Central City. They weren't afraid to throw the ball in the second matchup, and that took me by surprise a little bit, just because of the rushing success that they had had. But they seen things that they liked, took advantage of them, and really looked good against Central City. The one. Aurora now, they're hot 7 games in a row after losing the first three. I guess the one thing that keeps me from buying in completely on Aurora, my only reservation from saying, wow, this team, looks really impressive, is that, when you look at Central City without Kai's in both of those games, and, a banged up defense, and, it wasn't the same Central City team that we had seen earlier in the year. Some guys playing through some injuries. And so, when you look at what they did against Central City, I guess there's that little caveat there that I keep coming back to on that one. But, outside of that, everything they did worked. Being able to shut down Central City's passing attack, running attack, and just play well on defense, score on offense. And, the game got close early on, but then it was really just Aurora from there. So, they did turn over the ball a couple times, so some things that they can work on and improve. But overall, it was another dominant performance for Aurora. That pains me to say that, but that it was. And then Lakeview, Boys Town. There was a point on Friday night where that score was announced, and I heard multiple people go, "Oh wow, they didn't think that Boys Town was gonna make it as close as they did." But a good win from Lakeview, and I'm excited for this matchup. I think it's a really fun matchup, and you have two teams that are kind of similarly geographically located. So that always makes it a little bit more fun as well once we get into this point of the playoffs. But both teams, really looked good this last Friday, and I think it makes for an interesting matchup.
Yeah, I agree that this is a very interesting matchup. It stings a little bit to talk about that Aurora team ending our season, but they did a really good job on Friday night, and that first half was really pretty close. They had two long passing touchdowns to take the lead in the first half. They were up 21-7 at half with an 80-yard passing touchdown to Cannon Allen and then another 50-yard passing touchdown to Ryan Stair. Kind of caught Central City with some blown coverages, and that was really the difference in the first half. And then the second half, they just came out and established the run as they expected, and Wyatt Pollitt really just took over. He ran for 212 yards and a touchdown. They're very heavy in the quarterback counter game, where they'll fake to Ian Jensen in the back, and they'll run it with Jensen a lot too. He's got over 1,000 yards on the season, but they like to pull it a lot with Pullett, and then they'll get pullers out in front of him. 48, Jaden Smith is a big dude, fullback that they'll line up as a wing a lot, and he packs a really big punch pulling. As I know, as an outside linebacker, he's a legit dude, and they've just got a really really good push up front, and it's just as I said, heavy counter game, and the defense is going to be presented with a very different challenge this week than what they saw against Central City. They put all of their resources into stopping the Central City pass game because that's what the biggest threat was with Corbin Kai's going down for Central City. They didn't really have to respect much of the run game for Central City, just with different guys in the backfield, with Quinn Jensen being the primary back, with Schneider hurt too, and Jensen was a quarterback all year long. So really didn't have to respect the rushing threat too much. They just poured all their resources into the pass game. They're going to have to be different this week against Lakeview, who's going to run the football more so than throwing it with their two backs, Brandon Dienda and Trevor Slope. They like to pound the rock with those guys, although they can also throw the ball with receivers like Hank and Rathbone. And Lakeview kind of surprised a lot of people. I think they maybe overlooked Boys Town a little bit as they uh, kind of played down to Boys Town's level. I thought a little bit. Boys Town tied the game with 6 minutes to go, but then Lakeview took the lead on a last minute drive to pull out a close one, and they're going to have to play a lot better this week if they want to beat Aurora. But that defense is really good. I mean, they held Boys Town to 21 points, which was more points than they'd given up all year long, I'm pretty sure. Yes, all year long, that's the most points they'd given up. I have down here in my notes that through 7 games of the season, they hadn't given up 10 points in a game. So defense is really what they're going to hang their hats on, and they have a lot bigger guys in the trenches than Central City did. So it's just going to be an entirely different issue up front for them, both offensive line and defensive line wise, that they're going to have to deal with. And it's going to be really interesting to see that battle in the trenches. I think that's going to be what decides it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it pretty perfectly. I have a lot of these notes as well in mind. So, Aurora, their kind of identity, you've already hit it on. They like to pull a lot. They like to use that quarterback counter. They like to use him in the zone read game as well. He's a dangerous runner. And they also have some pass catchers that are dangerous. You mentioned Caden Allen had that long touchdown. Uh, they're a run first team, but they kind of like to expand off of the pass. But in the Central Cities games case, they kind of expanded off of last game as well. So it's a duo scheme for Central City, or not Central City, for Lakeview. They're kind of a duo scheme, a lot of downhill running. They make the game super physical. The O line is great. The O line is great. Pin and pulling, down blocking, double teams. That's their bread and butter. For Aurora for the defense. The D line makes it messy between the tackles. They hold their gaps very well and they allow their linebackers to do their job, but they don't particularly make any negative plays on the defensive line. I think that their offensive line is quite a bit better, even though it's the same type of guys. But so explosive or fast runners can have some steady gains against that and gash them a little bit there. But their pass defense can be impacted. Their safeties need to play faster and more downhill and less flat-footed versus Lakeview. Milford had a few big plays behind the safeties. So this defense will need the safeties to play well for sure. Lakeview's front, they allowed a huge 70-yard touchdown or 70-yard rush for the first play of the game versus Boys Town on a QB zone read. So we kind of see that with Wyatt Pullett there. But their pass defense is pretty good. They have good DBs and good pass rush. You've seen Boys Town. They were just bootlegging and sprint outs versus Lakeview just because they didn't trust their guy to sit in the pocket with them because they have a good pass rush. The linebackers are going to have their hands full again with the quarterback who runs with Aurora. They have a real dual threat quarterback. Lakeview is also a power down running team, just kind of like Aurora there. They also like to work from the double moves in the pass game, so they kind of like to make explosive plays in that and make those games or make those plays count. Their offensive line is good pass blocking, but in the run game, you like to have a little more to be desired. I think Boys Town played really fast, and that's what kind of gave Lakeview some trouble run blocking wise. We'll move to the picks here. I'll start here. I'm gonna go with Lakeview in another tight, low-scoring game.
I'll follow you up. I think this is the most interesting game of the week to me, with Aurora kind of turning a lot of heads, I think, beating Central City 2 weeks in a row. Nobody's going to be sleeping on Aurora anymore at this point. I think they know what kind of football team they are. But Lakeview, I just wasn't super impressed with the performance they put up against Boys Town. I think they're going to have to come out and play a lot better. I think this is a really, really good football team. I have them as the second best team in the state, just as their ranking shows. But I think they're going to have to come out and play a lot better. But I know this Aurora team is legit because I've been on the field with them, and they're going to present a lot of problems with their counter game, I think. And I just don't see Lakeview being able to contain that run game. I think they're going to have to play a lot better. I think a couple dynamic plays from Cannon Allen in the passing game will change this game a lot too. And I have Aurora on this
Yeah, now I feel like I'm just copying Luke on all these. I think both of these teams in some way have something to prove. Aurora, they've won seven straight, but you look at those two wins over Central City, like I talked about with the injury Central City had, and then you look at Lakeview, not the greatest performance out of them last week.
Okay, since we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, we will go back to Ryan for his Aurora and Lakeview pick. Who do you have in this one?
Yeah, Aurora and Lakeview, it's interesting to me. I think both of these still something to prove. Aurora's been on that 7 game win streak, and you look at Lakeview, they didn't have the best game last week. Can they put it together and show that they are a dominant force? But I really just like Aurora in this one. I think they've put something pretty special together, and I think they're going to keep that momentum going. So I'm going to take Aurora in this one.
All right. I mean, that's a good pick. I was close to picking them, but I think a lot of these games are going to be close, so um, should be a coin toss on a couple of them. So, with that being said, that is going to conclude our picks. And now we head in to the fantasy football draft where we select active high school football players playing in the current round. We'll give a little bit of a recap from last week. Uh, Luke had a phenomenal game with his team. He had 151 points collectively, and that is without Brady Eichelberger from O'Neill scoring. Kip Brigham 72 points for him on the day. So that was a big steal for him, getting Kip Brigham at the number one pick. And I was in second place with 125 without Gavin Lobster's stats. Wyatt Pullett had a good game, and then Ryan got third place this week. Tough week for Ryan, 66 points on the week. So, with that being said, the order
I
for
was
this week.
only able to get 2.4 points for Ryan, I think.
That's
One
points,
catch,
baby. That's all I asked out of you, Luke.
one catch for 14 yards in the
Yeah.
fourth quarter.
I was going nuts on the sidelines for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I think Luke set the record for our show with fantasy points. He probably is going to be around 160, 170 points. So that's a record-setting performance for his fantasy team. But with that being said, the order for this week, Ryan will be picking first, I'll be picking second, and then Luke will have the wraparound pick. So, for the first pick in the fantasy draft, Ryan, who are you going to take in round two?
I think that's a rhetorical question. I will take Kip Brigham.
I mean, that's the no-brainer pick. He has been absolutely insane this week or this year, really. So, second pick here. This is where it gets really tough. I think there's a lot of guys that can be taken. I don't think that there's a guy even where as close to Kip Brigham's fantasy upside here. But for my pick, I'm gonna go. This is a tough pick, but I'm gonna go with Dorsey, Rice Dorsey from Sydney. That might not be the overwhelming favorite for the second pick, but I think I have a gut feeling, and sometimes in fantasy football, you take the gut feelings. So that brings us to Luke. He has a wraparound pick here.
Well, I'm a bit surprised that it played out this way, but I'm going to take Will Jansen of Syracuse. He's the second leading rusher all season long, and I think he'll do well for this. And with second pick, this one is a little bit tougher. There's not really anybody that is clearly standing out, but although he did not have the strongest week last week, all year long he's been very productive, and I think that Cal Kissinger will be the best value at receiver at this point. So I'm going to go over to Ashland Greenwood and say that Cal Kissinger will be the leading receiver for.
Yeah, I mean, two picks in, and Luke already, that team looks pretty good. So for my next pick, I'm gonna go with Kale Smith from Ashland Greenwood, their RB1. I think that he's going to have a bounce back game from last week, even though he did have, I think he had a touchdown last week, but I think he should do good this week. And that'll bring us to Ryan, who has a wraparound pick of his own.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go. My first pick here, I'm going to go Cannon Allen of Aurora. Think he could be one of those Aurora players to step up and have a big game on Friday night. And let's see here. Got to put some thought into this one.
Looking for a bounce back for Ryan. He's got to get back in the race here.
I'm going to go with Adam Elofsson, Fort Calhoun.
All right, that brings us back to me. It's a lot of situational because a lot of these teams kind of spread the ball out a lot. But for me, I'm going to go with my first wide receiver, Mason Lynch, who's really a running back. So I'm picking a running back at receiver because he is in that wing T offense. So I'll take him, and that's going to bring us to Luke for another wraparound pick.
Maybe a bit of a stretch, but we'll go with it. For my next pick, I think I'm going. I'm going to go south of the Platte River and take Ian Jensen from Aurora, running back. And then I think I'm going to double down on Lakeview, or excuse me, Ashland Greenwood receivers and take Logan Fangmeyer. He went off last week. He was not on anybody's roster, but he would have had over 30 points, I believe. So I'm going to secure that with my next.
Back to me. Um, There's a top three quarterbacks that I think are pretty definitive here. So I'm going to take one. I'm going to go with Alex Doty as my quarterback. I think that he should have a way bigger game than he's had been. But I think I'm going to go with Alex Doty, and that's going to leave the other two quarterbacks on the board. Actually, you know what? I'm going to swap my pick. I'm going to go with Derek Tonjes from Lakeview. Sorry, Alex Doty. I'm sorry, but I'm going to take him. He had a huge game last week. And that will bring us to Ryan for another wraparound pick.
Mason Lynch still on the board.
Nope, I picked him.
Okay. That's that's my struggle now. I'm trying to remember who was picked and who wasn't.
Yeah, we're gonna let Danny have him as a receiver, even though he's a glorified running back in that wing tee.
Yeah.
Bit of a stretch, but
He's listed on Max Prep as a receiver.
H back maybe.
Something back. I don't know what those
I don't
wing
really know
guys
what you
call
call him in those things.
them. No.
So we face that offense against Lincoln Christian. It's quite the time playing against those.
Oh yeah, you gotta. I, whenever I played, I hated it. I hated it. It's terrible, but it works no matter the skill. So that's why a lot of teams run it.
I had fun with it until you wake up the next day and then whole body is just dead.
Guys, I'm blanking here.
I'll give you Wyatt Pullett and Alex Doty are still on the board for quarterback.
I think he
Um,
has Fort Calhoun's quarterback
Yeah,
already.
I took
oh, okay.
yeah.
Whoops. Okay, so we
So
got
there's Jed
Brendan
Ramold
Deanda.
and
Yeah.
sorry,
For running backs, I just have like a little big board. Brendan Deanda from Lakeview and also Trevor Slope. Those are their two main running backs. So either one of those. And then for receivers, the Sydney receiver. Wait, was Lance Holly picked?
Lance always not picked. No,
Okay, Lance Holly, Kean Kaiser, Nash Hank, Blake Rathbone, Blake Welcher.
Brandon Mose.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's the two Mount Michael backs also, and then Casey
Yeah.
Rodriguez.
All right. So with my next pick, I'm gonna take Blake Rathbone, Lakeview. I get a wraparound pick, right?
Yep.
Let's go. Kean Kaiser, Sydney.
Yeah, I think he should play a role in that game, getting the ball out a little quicker and getting those playmakers if they think that they have the matchup. But for me, my next pick, I have a wide receiver and a flex left. I'm going to take a wide receiver. I'm going to go with Lance Holly here from Sydney.
Yeah, so left for me, I need a flex and a quarterback to finish out my team. For my flex, I think I'm gonna go to Lakeview and take Brandon Deanda, very talented player. And then to finish my team and select a quarterback. For a second, I thought I was gonna have my pick of Tonjes and Pollitt, but or Alec Doty. I think between Paul and Doty, you have two really interesting dual threat quarterbacks. But I think Wyatt Pollitt on the ground is just unreal. He had over 200 yards rushing last week, so I think that he brings too much value in the run game for me to ignore. So I'm going to take him from.
Yeah, I think he's bound to have a good game, especially because that Boys Town quarterback had a few huge rushes in that game. So I think if they can kind of recreate that, he should have a good game. And then for my rounding up my team, I have a flex, so I can pick a running back or a receiver here. It's a tough pick here. Uh, Blake Welchert for him. Fort Calhoun is still on the board, and I picked Fort Calhoun to win. So I'm gonna pick Blake Welchert here. I think he's their number one guy. So Blake Welchert is on my fantasy team. That will round out my team as well as Luke's. And now for Ryan to finish out his squad. Who do you have?
think there's only one thing I can do here, and that's not mess with tradition. So, automatic zero or not, Mr. Irrelevant, Luke McCard.
Not playing this week, Ryan.
He will play in my heart.
All right, guys, that will wrap up the playoff preview and predictions. Huge thanks for these guys. And at the end of the show, we're going to ask where you can find these guys on social media and some of their work. So I'll let them say that really fast before we head out.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Mchargue_Luke, and then you can find my work broadcasting at the Pastime Sports Network. We'll be picking up some of that eventually with baseball. So
Yeah, and RN Sports, Facebook, Instagram, other places. Never know what I have going on. So I always come up with crazy ideas. So, RN Sports, keep a look there.
All right, so that's going to wrap everything up. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week as we figure out the final four team standing and get a little bit closer to that state championship game. We will see you guys next week. All right, appreciate you guys.